Queen Victoria is in the house.
It's very much how I like to be addressed at all times.
Yes, indeed. Where's the red carpet?
Exactly.
Guys, sort it out. Victoria, I've been very much looking forward to meeting you and to interview you, and I get to do it on a stage in Singapore. How good.
You're very lucky.
I'm very lucky. I'm going to flip the script slightly and talk a little bit about you first. You've been in this gig for a year and 4 months.
That's right.
You bring fresh eyes into this job. You didn't come from the record industry. Where did you come from?
I was in government for a very long time. I was a British diplomat for about 20 years, and then I worked for Google for quite a long time, and then I worked in consultancy. So my whole career has been spent thinking about how you talk to stakeholders about an issue or an industry, and particularly how you talk to governments about why that industry matters. And I think you can see a direct link here, because I think that's exactly what the music industry needs at the moment.
I agree, absolutely. With those fresh eyes, a year and 4 months, what are your thoughts on this record industry you've found yourself in?
Ooh, lots of thoughts. The first one is that this is quite a messy industry, right? You wouldn't design it like this if you were starting today. We've made things quite complicated for ourselves. So I think it's a tricky industry to navigate, and that becomes quite important for some of the things that we want to achieve. The other thing that I'm very struck by, though, as a newcomer, is genuinely everybody I've met in the industry deeply cares about it. And all of the execs that I meet in record labels, you know, I had some suspicion about whether or not everybody was there for the right reasons before I came into the industry. But I genuinely get to work with people who get up in the morning and want to make their artist's dream come true, and that is their passion. And I think we're really lucky to be an industry stuffed full of people like that who really care about the industry. It also seems to be remarkably addictive, and I've yet to find an example that kind of proves me wrong on this, but it seems that once you join the music industry, you stay in it. So it might be that people move from a record label to a distributor to a trade body or something, but I haven't really met anybody who says, I tried the music industry for a couple of years, wasn't for me, so I left. I meet people who tell me their whole kind of career story from the first time they entered the music industry.
It might be, yeah, I agree with that totally. If you're into music, if you love music, you want to work in music. There are also some skills in the record industry that are non-transferable. So that's part of it. You arrive, for an outsider looking in, I'm a journalist, I don't work in the record industry, but I observe it. It feels like a good time compared to what it was 25 years ago. I started writing about the music industry in year 2000 with Billboard magazine, and it was a strange time because the IFPI had announced at that time the largest pile of revenue from the record industry ever. And it was also the year Napster arrived. So you had this creeping issue, which no one really realised for a year or two. And we saw, it felt like a death roll for the record industry. Every year for 10 years, it was contracting by 10%. And you mentioned the people that you meet who love the record industry. I suspect there was a reset during that time where a lot of the hangers-on were cut loose. So you arrive at a really interesting time, and it's a time of growth. And every year you publish the Global Music Report. We should probably talk about that. I love sitting in on your the conference calls. Streaming, of course, is the engine room to the growth, not just streaming, it's also vinyl. We'll jump into that. Let's talk a little bit about the region we're in now, Asia. How's it looking?
Well, it's good that you used the word growth, and you're right that little potted history reflects on quite a sad period in the music industry where things were hard and where I don't think we always behaved brilliantly as an industry. I can say that because I wasn't here then, right?
You're talking about suing consumers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty dark days.
But I also think it's proof of the music industry's resilience and the fact that it did get its act together and figure it out and did adapt phenomenally after some teething problems, let's call them, to a new world. And so a lot of the conversations that I have with people these days are about whether or not the industry can grow and change again and adapt to some of the new challenges that are coming that I'm sure we'll talk about in this conversation. But we've proven it more than once, particularly then, I would argue, that we kind of got our act together, adapted, and figured it out. And so I'm proud of the industry for making that set of changes. And growth is back, as you said. This is an industry that has recovered well, although it took a while. And we've seen 10 years of consecutive growth in the recorded music industry, which is an impressive recovery from an industry that, as you said, 20 years ago, everybody said it was over and there would be no recorded music industry and nobody would ever need a record label again. And what was the point of all these guys that sat in their fancy offices? And all of that was proven wrong. So growth is back. And as you say, at the IFPI, we are data obsessed. And I want us to be a real steward of the best possible information about the industry for the industry. All industries are data obsessed these days, but it really matters to know what's happening, what the trends are, in order to understand and in order for my members to be able to plan their businesses. So 10th consecutive year of growth, fantastic. Some interesting trends within that. So you talked about the fact that streaming growth is the absolute kind of driver of that. Obviously, particularly paid subscription is the driver of that growth. But we continue to see ad-supported streaming in certain parts of the world. We actually see physical is not completely disappearing, but the pattern of physical is changing. And vinyl is in its 18th year of consecutive growth, which I think is both confusing and fascinating. And it's particularly strong in this region. Now, Asia is hard to categorize, and rightly so. It's no such thing as a homogenous region, and that's just as true for music revenues as it is for anything else. So we see completely different market patterns, whether we're talking about the Philippines, for example, or China, or indeed Australia. What's great is that Asia as a whole has grown in every one of those 10 consecutive years of growth, continued to do so in 2024, and we see even more promising signs of growth so far in 2025. Some of the most impressive growth comes in this part of Asia. So the countries of Southeast Asia, although small in pure revenue terms, have really impressive growth rates, hovering at somewhere between 18 and 22%. So kind of rivaling the regions that have the absolute strongest growth overall. And I mean, if you've ever run a business, then frankly, growth of 18 to 22% those are numbers you'd be very happy to take home. China is obviously booming, complicated, fascinating. For me, I think what is really great about this part of the world when it comes to music is the rich diversity of the talent. And any record label exec or business can tell you lots and lots of things about why music grows, but the reason music grows is because there is talent and artists who want to tell a story.
We love music. That's why we're all here. 10 years of consecutive growth. Will we see an 11th year? Is it too early to tell?
My data team would absolutely kill me if I revealed something like that, but I'm optimistic that we will see good growth.
We'll just keep it into this room, won't we? We won't share it.
Yeah, sure.
Sort of these
That'll
walls.
be fine.
The report also mentioned 750 million subscription accounts for streaming music.
I think that's a really impressive number. And you know, we said subscription streaming is what's driving the growth. It is the way more and more people access music, and it is the way that we know works, and it continues to enable that funding of the music ecosystem to continue. There are parts of the world where that streaming penetration is still limited in terms of paid subscription, and I am ambitious that we see more of that. It's particularly true in India, for example, but it's also true in France. So it's not region-specific. But I see that as a real opportunity for growth. There's more that we can do. There are more consumers that we can reach.
And there was a hint that ad-supported streaming products, the growth was slowing.
Yep.
So we've seen that type of model behave as an entry point for many people who then graduate into paid products. Is that something we should be concerned about?
So we see it exactly that way, that it is often a kind of gateway to moving on to a more premium or paid subscription service. That might be a family account, that might be a local platform, it might be a widely used platform. So as long as that's a gateway and that transition is happening, we believe that there's a place for both.
The big issues facing the record industry, I mean, we have to say those letters, AI. You have an idea of how we can put the genie back in the bottle or tame him, put a leash on him. What do we do about AI? Not only is it a threat to any creative industry, it's a threat to journalists as well. We had a long chat about this earlier. Tell me your thoughts.
So I think we need to be careful how we frame this conversation about generative AI in music, because I actually think that it's a really powerful tool if it's used correctly and appropriately.
We're talking about licensing here. If the licenses are applied to the generative AI, then everyone wins.
Yeah. So as a tool for musicians and artists, brilliant. Loads of cool stuff that I don't even begin to understand that they can do in terms of both how they reach their fans, how they market their work, how they create their work. But as I said, used properly and appropriately. What worries me deeply for our industry and for humanity and creativity, if that's not too alarmist to say, is, frankly, large language AI models training without permission on artists' work. And when I say without permission, I really mean without permission, let alone a license, let alone compensation. Let's even start with, are you allowed to use this work? Does the artist or the rights holder know that the work has been used? So in my mind, there are these kind of giant machines that live in the basement that are ingesting artists' works, and they are then creating or spitting out at the other end AI-generated tracks that then freely compete in the marketplace with the original works. Now, this isn't really a discussion about whether or not you think AI-generated music is good or not, whether you think it's high quality or not. I personally don't, but there may be plenty of people that do, and that's absolutely fine. But I do object strongly to a world in which somebody has created a work, has the rights to it, and doesn't even know that it's being ingested and used by the computer in the basement. So I think there is a licensing market that can exist and thrive. And as the trade body, I would argue strongly that this can and should exist and is a new source of revenue for artists and rights holders. So I absolutely don't want to kind of get in the way of this happening, but there's a very basic principle that would fix all of this, and it's about transparency. And I remember when I got into this job thinking, I work in the record industry, this is so cool, it's going to be amazing. Do you know what? I talk a lot about transparency and record keeping, which isn't the cool stuff I thought I'd talk about, but it turns out it's incredibly important. So what we want is a system that is fair, where you can know whether or not your work has been used, or indeed ideally be asked whether or not your work can be used, and then you can license and be compensated for it if you want to. And it's really easy to do. Really easy. I used to work in the tech sector. Lots and lots of AI companies will claim this is impossible to do. Transparency requirements are far too difficult. But I can tell you for sure, if you run an AI model worth its salt, you know exactly what you're training it on, because you care about the quality and you care about what pops out at the other end. So if you know what you're training on, tell the world what you're training it on.
Is legislation the answer as well, without getting too bogged down in issues happening across borders? Certainly there's a problem in Australia with amendments to the Copyright Act, and the powerful lobby bodies from Google and the tech bros, they're asking for a data exemption for data mining, which creates a real problem.
It does. And look, I don't want to get even more boring by talking about TDM exceptions, but they're really important. There is an answer, and the answer is we have an existing body of copyright law. It's really good. It works. It's served us well. We simply need to take that body of law and find smart ways of applying it in a generative AI world. And I don't think it's that hard to do.
Good. Vinyl, you mentioned, was it 18 years?
18 years of consecutive growth.
What's driving it? Because I have a theory, you have a theory.
Yeah.
I think I'm not curious to know how many kids who buy vinyl are actually playing it on turntables, but I think they're tactile, tangible pieces of art, which a lot of kids stick on their walls.
I agree. I think there are a couple of fascinating things about it. The first is 18 years of consecutive growth in sales of vinyl records. There are not 18 years of consecutive growth in sales of turntables that play vinyl records. So we already know that these are becoming more and more a collector's item, a piece of merchandise, a way of having some kind of connection with your artist. And so whilst I think a lot of young people buy them because they are pieces of art, as you say, I also think we learned this probably during the COVID period, where fans really longed to have connection with their artists. They couldn't have it through live performances during that time, and we really saw a resurgence of vinyl in that period. It's also interesting that for a long time what we saw in vinyl sales was the Beatles, Fleetwood Mac. There are some kind of known older artists who sell vinyl time and time again. Now we see just as much Sabrina Carpenter and Taylor Swift as we do the Beatles being sold in vinyl.
I see these red digits ticking down, screaming at us that we are running out of time. You must be very optimistic about how the record industry is moving forward.
I am optimistic. I think there are some headwinds coming at us, and we have to get it right on AI. And as I said to you, I think it's eminently fixable, and AI is a really powerful tool as well as a risk. So if we can get that right, then I'm optimistic for the music industry. I think there are some other concerns around streaming fraud, which is frankly ripping off artists left, right, and center, and we need to put a stop to that. But I feel truly optimistic about the industry, and I feel truly optimistic about record labels as well. I think artists have more choice than they've ever had before. I think, contrary to popular opinion, and I get to see the data, so I know this to be true, artists are taking home more money than ever before from the records that they're making. I think the landscape has got complicated for them to navigate, and so record labels play a really different role than they did 25 years ago, right? They're there to accompany an artist on their journey as they find a way to bring their story to fans. And that requires all sorts of skill sets, lots of them in the marketing and social media and brand and partnership space that weren't really the case 20 years ago, and that some artists can do some of it on their own, but they really need that professional skill set to take them on their journey and ensure that they reach their audiences, which is what they want to do. So I think we will see more music, more complexity, more and more artists on the scene, and a continued role for record labels in bringing them to that. I also think we will see more music that isn't just in English, or isn't just from the country I live in, or from the US, or from your country. And I think that is phenomenal. And of course I would say that because I'm here in Asia, but the bits of my job that I love are when I get to go and look at how Latin American music is spreading across the world and reaching new audiences, even beyond its first, perhaps most obvious neighbor in the US. Or come here and do something like we did this morning, where we launched the official Singapore charts and meet artists who are looking at how their music sells in the country next door and the country next door to that one. And so less and less is this about, the one or two artists that we've got to know who will continue to be phenomenal, but it's about music in lots of different languages, bringing lots of different culture to bear. And I love that opportunity is available for artists from everywhere now.
I love that you got in there the Singapore charts. You did. I was going to get that out of you. Streaming fraud, you mentioned earlier. Who is the burden of responsibility lie with streaming fraud? Is it the streaming platforms? Are they completely responsible to deal with that?
Unfortunately, it's an ecosystem problem, and I think all of us have a role to play in fixing it, including the record labels that I represent. And frankly, I suspect that in streaming fraud, we've spent a little bit too long going, oh, it's your fault, or it's your fault, or it's your fault, and all kind of pointing fingers at one another, whilst the fraudsters are having a great time making a load of money.
Same problem with the download era. The music industry always finds problems that they take a long time to deal with. We have 1 minute left. It would be wrong for me to not ask you whether or not you're a music person. I think you really are.
I definitely am. My husband would say I have terrible taste in music, which I think is outrageous.
Give us an idea.
So framed on my wall behind my desk at work is my cassette of the Spice Girls' first album.
#1 in the US.
Exactly.
Launched Girl Power.
Launched Girl Power, enormous fan. But in the last 6 months, I've been lucky enough to go to a whole bunch of amazing concerts. I went to a country music festival. I went to see Beyonce live. I went to see Kendrick Lamar with my 14-year-old son and learned a whole new host of swear words that I don't think I ever want to use again. So I think the great joy of music is the variety, and I love that I can be both a country music fan and a Spice Girls fan at the same time.
I'm fluent in those words. Please thank Victoria Oakley.